Hey, what is going on, crypto people? Happy freaking Friday. Happy Friday to each and every one of you. Listen, I'm probably going to do a live stream today. Gonna hang out with Miss Crypto Siege here in a little bit. We're going to spend some time together hanging out. I came across a very, very interesting post on X that I wanted to share with you guys. Look, a lot of kind of madness going on in the world today with the tariffs, to tariff or not to tariff. And that is the question. Listen, I came across a very, very interesting article or post on X that I want to share with you guys. I think for me, 85, 90% of it makes complete sense to me. 85, 90% of it. Okay. And so I wanted to share with you guys. I was listening to my guy Jungle Inc. earlier today. Shout out to you, my guy. Hope you're doing well. And he brought up the tariffs, and he kind of shared how he was not, he's not a this, he's not an economist, he's not that, his channel's not political. He doesn't have he doesn't really have a view on it, that he wants to bring in form of content. I do, but I really wanted to share this lady's post because again, 85 to 95% maybe makes sense to me. I know I said originally 85 to 90%, but 85 to 95% of this post, it's a long one. It makes sense to me. Then I'm going to share our interesting global view from our guy, Raul Paul. So in any case, guys, listen, I'm going to get into it. This is your XRP Ripple daily news in around 0 to 10 minutes. So let's do it. This is from Tanvi. Hope I'm saying that right. Tanvi Ratna. Hope I'm saying that right. Who is Tanvi Ratna? You might ask. It says here, reinventing governance. The founder of re-engineered government and billions scale. Tech native AI and crypto policy research for 44 governments and G20. Capitol Hill, Georgetown, EY. I won't hold that against her. All right, so it says here, Trump's new tariffs aren't a trade tweak. They are the first move in a full spectrum reset. $9.2 trillion in debt matures in 2025. 9.2 trillion. Inflation lingers, alliances are shifting. One announcement just set a dozen wheels in motion. Here's what is really happening and why it matters. Tommy goes on to state, start with the debt. 9.2 trillion must be refinanced in 2025. If rolled into 10-year bonds, every 1 basis point drop in rate saves approximately $1 billion a year. So a 0.5% drop would save $1 billion a year. 0.15 drop would save 500 billion over a decade. Okay, over a decade. Lower yields free up fiscal room. Without them, core spending gets crowded out. Okay, you with me? How to push yields down with sticky inflation and cautious Fed, you might ask. Manufacture uncertainty, sweep in with tariffs, spook the markets, right? Manufacture uncertainty. You understand what she's saying? That what's going on with, right? Manufacture uncertainty, create uncertainty. Sweep in with tariffs, spook the markets, trigger risk off, money exits stocks, floods into long-term treasuries. A deliberate detox to cool the economy and cut refinancing costs. You understand? But cheap refinancing isn't enough on its own. Even at lower rates, the debt remains enormous. That's where the next lever comes in, cutting the deficit. Elon Musk and Doge are cutting $4 billion per day. And people are running around burning up cars and graffitiing into stores. At that pace, they'd shave off 1 trillion, Elon and Doge, by the end of September of 2025, if not by May, she says. Let's listen to this 50-second clip here from Elon.
I'm just here trying to make government more efficient, eliminate waste and fraud, and so far we're making good progress, actually. So our savings at this point exceed $4 billion a day.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very significant.
You think you'll wind up getting to $1 trillion of
Yeah,
savings?
I mean, unless we're stopped, we will get to $1 trillion of savings.
And that stuff can be translated. I mean, we've been talking, we had Russell Vogt, the OMB director, on earlier, through very rescission authority, impoundment authority. But I believe you said earlier, it's an audit that will not gather dust on shelves. It's actually going to wind up with real savings, bend the spending baseline down.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So with these savings, the big economic pillar to successfully delivering on Secretary of Treasury Scott Bessent's 333 plan is to get growth up. Tariffs come in as a trigger for domestic industrial revival. The thinking is by making imports expensive, you create room for U.S. producers to step in. But here's the problem. American factories can't scale up overnight. So in the short term, consumers will face higher prices. The administration knows this. That's why they are front-loading the pain now, betting that by 2026, the benefits will be visible. In the meantime, they're offering some near-term relief. Tax cuts already been floated, or tax cuts have already been floated to help offset the cost burden on households. And while risky, currency devaluation may follow later to make imports cheaper without lifting the tariffs, which is what Raoul Paul is essentially saying and has been saying. Don't forget, tariffs also bring in revenue. Estimates suggest that they could raise over $700 million within the first year. That's not a game changer on its own, but it gives the Treasury a bit more room to maneuver, especially if paired with deficit cuts. Okay, and there's a nice article about the 700 billion. This says 700 million. This says 700 billion. Here's one estimate of how much revenue the governments will raise with Trump's tariffs. 700 billion, 835. All right. So Capital Economics estimated that maybe she meant 700 billion, but she said 700 by the first year. So let me read this. Capital Economics estimated that the import taxes outlined by President Trump Wednesday afternoon are likely to annually generate about that much in customs duties. The tariffs will raise a maximum of $835 billion, the firm's economists calculate. But assuming such high tariffs lead to a market decline in imports, the increase in revenues will probably end up being closer to $700 billion. So I don't know if maybe she meant billion there. But anyway, they wrote in a note to clients. Meanwhile, the economists say that since imports account for about 10% of the consumption, the roughly 25% effective tariff rate they calculate will add 2.5 to consumer prices, lifting inflation to above 4% by the end of the year. Under those circumstances, we continue to expect the Fed to hold interest rate unchanged this year, they wrote. So maybe she meant 700 billion. But in any case, there's a plan, there's a strategy to the madness, if you will. Still, this approach isn't without risk. If domestic supply chains can't catch up, or if global retaliation kicks in, inflation could rise again. And if that happens, the Fed may be forced to raise rates, which would blow a hole in the low yield plan. That's the tightrope. A common critique is, why impose tariffs before building out the capacity to replace the imports? But that assumes tariffs are the end goal. Tanvi says they are not. They're the starting gun, a way to force movement both inside the US and around the world, which brings us to geopolitics. Before tariffs, Trump's team signaled a global order reset, pulling back from NATO, cooling EU ties, and opening diplomatic space with Russia, Saudi Arabia, etc. Tariffs now serve as leverage to renegotiate terms based on America First policy, which is what I believe and we believe in the Crypto Seizures Home. Expect a lot of bilateral deals in the coming months. Tariffs will be lowered for countries that offer strategic concessions on trade, security, or industrial policy. Those that resist, they'll pay higher costs until they decide to come to the table. China is the focal point. Observers have long argued China isn't a poor country. It's a wealthy, high-capacity state that floods markets with exports its currency, with exports its currency artificially low. Okay, tariffs could be used to force big moves like currency appreciation by China. Lines will be redrawn with other allies too. Europe may be pushed to cut exposure to China or negotiate on Ukraine. India may be forced to cut tariffs and move closer to United States alignment. I think that's more likely than not. Mexico and Canada could face demands to crack down on fentanyl trafficking routes. That is a goal. They want to do that, the current administration, for sure. This fentanyl thing is a problem. And it's a big, trying to depopulate a country is a strategy. In the United States economy, there will be clear winners and losers. Steel, auto, and textiles are likely to benefit, industries that form Trump's political base. But tech, retail, and construction sectors more reliant on imports could take a hit, especially in swing states. That's the political gamble. If jobs return fast enough in key states and inflation remains under control, the tariffs may look like a bold but effective move. But if prices spike and job creation lags, the strategy could backfire by November of 2026. The Wisconsin seat was a warning. Less than 18 months to show results for midterms, less than 18 months to show results for midterms. Voters don't respond to stratagems. They respond to prices, jobs, and narratives. FDR had fireside chats. Reagan had Morning in America. President Trump needs a similar, consistent messaging to Americans. I couldn't agree more. Right? The people will do awesome things if they can see. If they can see, right? It's important that the CEO of the country is able to draft the message and communicate it effectively. Then the people will do all kinds of awesome things if they can see the future, right? So here's the big picture. Lower yields ease the debt wall. Spending cuts restore fiscal discipline. Tariffs jumpstart domestic growth, and geopolitics gets rewritten in America's favor. It's disruption by design with enormous stakes. If it works, it's a defining success. Debt under control, manufacturing reborn. So, I mean, if we could get those first two, oh my gosh, can you imagine the debt under control? How about remanufacturing again in this country? That just would be awesome. Global leverage restored. We've lost that leverage. People don't think that we have, but we have. She says Trumpism vindicated in 2026. I didn't know they were calling it that. Trumpism. All right. She says if it fails, however, inflation, retaliation, lost midterms, strategic drift, 18 months to find out if the gamble pays off. She says here, I guess she had a correction to something she said, I guess. Thanks to a few folks who asked me for points of clarification. A 0.5% drop in 10-year treasury yields will save about $50 billion in interest payments over 10 years, not $500 billion per Secretary Bessent's rate of $1 billion savings per basis point. Okay. Currency devaluation could likely be considered after tariffs are renegotiated to make American exports cheaper, parentheses, not imports. In the current churn, the dollar will appreciate against other currencies, possibly offsetting import price rises. For example, in the 2018-2019 China tariffs, a 17.9% effective tariff increase was partially offset by a 13.7% renminbi depreciation, reducing the net price impact to 4.1%. So anyway, she's just doing her stuff. She said someone said your original calculation was correct. So anyway, she corrected the math, and then someone says, nope, your original thing was right. But that's great food for thought. I hope you take it that way and take a listen to it, pause it for yourself and see if that makes sense to you. I'm with 85 to 95% of that just makes sense to me. I think the administration is fully aware of the risk, but the reward is worth the risk. That's what I see. And that's why I see that they're looking at it. Because look, we're in trouble. We're the United States is Barney, baby. Barney. Trouble. Okay. You got to get that. And if the United States is, what does that mean for the rest of the world? Like a lot of people keep missing it. If the United States is in trouble and the largest debtor nation ever, what does that mean for the rest of the world? You understand? How bad off are they? Which means the world is crapola. Do you understand what I'm saying? We got to fix it. And the United States has got to lead. So it's got to be the one who takes the biggest risk. Raul Paul sums it up, and I think it's important to note. Looking forward to his video on Monday. He says this: people are yet to understand that we have a macro hedge fund manager running the treasury, not an ex-central banker. He deeply understands liquidity impacts and how to drive financial conditions to drive liquidity and how that in turn drives the economy and markets. His entire strategy is to lower the three legs of financial conditions: dollar, rates, and oil, to goose the business cycle, which is the ISM. Our GMI, says Raul Paul, our GMI financial conditions index is screaming higher, as is global M2, which means conditions are loosening. And even more importantly, GMI global total liquidity. The effect should kick in the next week or two, and the recovery in asset prices and economic data should be sharp in the coming weeks and should be persistent. Raul goes on to say, I'll do a full video on this for all on Monday. Can't stress how important this all is versus the tariffs narrative, right? So 2 points of view, 2 bigger macro, sharing out the macro and the vision for what could possibly happen. And that's where I kind of tend to look. I want to see the bigger picture. I want to see, it's not about what's right in front of me. I want to be able to see further down the line, right? Take a look around the corner, right? That's where I am at on all of this kind of stuff. So in any case, with all that being said, continue to hodl strong. If you're in a position to do so, I would ask you to consider that possibility for you and your family. We're hodling strong with our XRP and other digital assets in this space, and believe in the bigger picture and the bigger macro picture definitely benefits digital asset holders. I really, truly do believe that. All right, fam. There it is. This wraps up your XRP Ripple Daily News in around 0 to 10 minutes. I hope that it has been of value to you. If it has, do me a favor, hit that like button. It's one of the greatest ways to support the channel. And if you happen to be in that 55% or so of people that are hanging out, listening to and watching the Crypto Stage, do me a favor. If you've been enjoying those hangouts, please consider subscribing to the channel. And don't forget to ring that notification bell, baby, so that you know whenever we go live or whenever we upload a video. I'm going to end this one like I do all my videos and remind you guys of this. Old money doesn't want you to win. But that's okay, though, because you and I, we're already winning. And I would ask you to consider this, or perhaps ponder the idea or notion of living your life permissionless. I'll talk to you guys soon. See ya. Bye. Mm-hmm.